Hello, and welcome to another episode of Boundless Body Radio. I'm your host, Casey Ruff, and today we have another amazing guest introduced to you now. Emily Penton is the creator of the Inner Clarity System, which focuses on how to create your new way of being. Emily has learned that feeling helpless, hopeless, and worthless is a false reality that comes with contaminated thinking. According to her, the food we eat is the first pollutant that creates the physical distress in our brains. The wrong combination of foods, plus overprocessed and imitation foods, locks us into cravings and inflammation. Therefore, the brain and the body have diminished capacity, and excessive medications are used to feel better and overcome the brain fog. The toxic accumulation of chemicals becomes ineffective. The residue builds, and bad food, unnecessary medication, and crippling thinking creates a powerful trifecta overlording our lives, which, according to her, is no way to live. Emily Penton proposes a new way of freedom by creating a way of living that guarantees clarity, purpose, and simplicity as the key to your being: a vibrant, healthy body, a strong, clear mind, and a true spirit. This peaceful transformation is attainable through animal-based diets and retraining the mind. You can find Emily on her website at www.innerclaritysystem.com. Emily Penton, what an absolute honor it is to welcome you to Boundless Body Radio.
Hi, thank you so much. Thank you so much
It's
for having me.
Absolutely. I took that introduction primarily from your website that more described your business because I purposely wanted to save your own personal story for the actual episode itself. I deliberately left that out. You have an insane story of recovering some very, very serious health conditions. And so I'm so excited to deep dive into that with you. I do also want to say you and I share basically the same kind of carniversary right around April of 2019. So congratulations of about
Hey,
five and
twin.
a half years. Yeah, cool. That's awesome. So anyway, let's get right into your story, which again I find fascinating. Tell us about your journey into, what ended up being diagnosed with several severe, complications.
Yeah. And it's so funny because I didn't know what I was dealing with whenever I started on this journey. I thought I was just dealing with mental illness. And then I discovered a little bit later that I was dealing with multiple sclerosis as well. So for me personally, I had to make it as simple as possible. I didn't have the mental capacity to read scientific journal articles or watch 2 hour long, videos. I had to just give me the basics. Because my bipolar disorder had turned into rapid cycling. And let me back up just a little bit. The really tricky part with that is that I had my master's in clinical counseling and I was practicing as a therapist. So for me to be experiencing mental illness does not bode well for my career at all. And I was able to do it because bipolar disorder goes into cycles and you have a window of good time. You have a window of time where you're stable and you're able, and honestly, most bipolar people usually knock it out of the park.
Mm.
They're usually do really, really well, but nobody knows that the days that they don't see them, they're in bed with the covers over their head, wanting to not wake up the next day. And so it came to the point where it was unethical for me to continue practicing because I didn't know who I was from one day to the next. It was like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. And at that point, I was eating ramen noodles and Doritos and Oreos and entire pizzas by myself and donuts and cakes and all the things and wine in the box. So I did not, I want to preface that by saying I didn't have like a healthy lifestyle. I had the typical standard American diet. And then, like you said, February of 2019, so right there before you, I found out about a story of a woman who had bipolar disorder and she resolved it 10 years prior by eating fatty animal meat. And all I heard was like Dumb and Dumber, like, you're telling me there's a chance? And so I was like, I don't care. And the cool part about bipolar disorder is we can jump in. Like we have that like just impulsivity. And I went all in. And so overnight, I went from Doritos and ramen noodles to only eating burgers and bacon and chicken wings and steaks. and beef brisket. And then miraculously, my last bipolar episode was April of 2019. And then I went back to work full time in June. My psychiatrist tapered me off of all my psych meds. My last psych med was September of 2019. And I've been stable ever since, eating fatty animal meat. The tricky part was 3 weeks into eating this way, I was hospitalized and I couldn't swallow water. So a logical person would say, I started this all meat diet and now I'm hospitalized and I can't even swallow water. I need to go back to the Doritos and the ramen noodles. But something in me knew that I was on the right track. They did MRIs and a lumbar puncture, and they diagnosed me with multiple sclerosis. Very soon after that, I couldn't walk without an assistive device. I had delayed and slurred speech and more significant brain fog than I ever had with bipolar disorder. So I just kept eating the meat and I kept researching, okay, this is inflammation and I'm reducing inflammation. And my last MS symptom was May 9th of 2019. They followed up with all the MRIs and my lesions just kept shrinking. My last MRI showed no new MS activity. I still haven't had a symptom since May 9th of 2019 for multiple sclerosis.
Wow,
So that's my
that's
story.
that's amazing. I just think if somebody hadn't heard that kind of thing before, they might have a really tough time believing you that you're able to clear all of those things up. But you know, you said the same thing, right? Like if it wasn't you and your own story, you might not even believe yourself telling it.
Not might. I wouldn't. I wouldn't. I would be like, oh, that's cute for you, but that's not for me. And what I think is really important is that I did not make a logical decision to eat this way. It was a knowing. It was a spiritual experience. I heard it and I resonated with it so strongly. And so I think sometimes that's really all we have to do is to really navigate into leaning into what our body is trying to tell us. Hey, this is the direction. Go that way. Kind of like that game Hot and Cold.
Yeah, I like that. That's very well explained. I want to go back early on when you were first noticing bipolar and some of the symptoms that you were getting from the bipolar. What was that like in the very beginning? In hindsight, I'm sure you discovered it far later than you were actually having a lot of the symptoms and maybe just kind of played it off. What is it like?
Yeah, it's really funny because you don't realize the distortion until you get the correct vision. And so it's like, okay, say you need glasses and you're driving down the street and you can't read the street signs until you get right up on the street. And you don't know until you get glasses that your vision is off. And you're like, oh, I was supposed to be able to see that. And so for me with bipolar disorder, it's literally a lens that we see our lives through that's distorted. For instance, someone might say to me, hey, it's a really nice day outside. And I don't hear that whenever I'm in bipolar disorder. I hear, it's a nice day outside. Why aren't you outside cleaning the car? Why aren't you outside doing the gardening? Why are you just sitting on the couch when it's such a nice day outside? They didn't say that, but that's what I heard. I heard the accusations. I heard the judgments. And that's what I heard when anybody would speak to me. And then of course I had that negative self-talk in my own story in my own brain. And so I didn't realize that that was literally the filter that I saw everything through until I had that clear vision and everything lifted. And I was like, oh, like I'm okay. I'm really doing a great job. And so might be saying something over there, and that has nothing to do with me. And that piece is where I actually found the freedom from the bipolar disorder, but I couldn't get there eating ramen noodles and Doritos.
Yeah. Okay. One of my favorite interviews that you've done was on Carrie Mann's channel, The Homestead How. I really love that interview that you guys did. And you talked a little bit about that, is how like you really don't notice the things around you when you're in it. It's like being in the fog. I think you guys referenced. Like I'm looking outside today and in Salt Lake City, and it's completely blue sky, not a cloud in the sky, but the air quality is still not that great. And so you don't realize that your visibility is not as good as you thought it was. Yeah, or when there's no pollution, it's way better. And I think back to when I started Carnivore, April 2019, and I remember like a very stressful thing happened, and it was okay. And I remember thinking like, why is this so okay? Why is that tree so beautiful? And like the birds, and like you realize like, oh, I've been spinning around in all these weird problems I've been inventing for myself that were never going to happen. I didn't know that. I was not diagnosed with anxiety. It wasn't severe enough that it was hampering my life, but boy, was it uncomfortable looking back, especially when you get on the other side of it. So it's interesting that you point that out.
Yeah. And honestly, I think that unfortunately, we don't have these conversations a lot. And so people don't know that, you're flipping through Facebook and somebody has this cute little white picket fence life, and you think that that is reality. And it actually isn't, because we don't have these honest conversations about anxiety, depression, and our mental health. And so a lot of people, what I love so much is I'll be working with a client, they'll get to like day 35, 45, and then it'll lift and they'll be like, oh, hey, so my husband's still my husband, my job is still my job, my kid is still my kid, my car is still my car, but I'm okay. Like their circumstances don't change. They do. Their perspective changes. And then they're like, I can handle anything. Like I can take on whatever comes at me because I am the tool. I am the technology that is going to be able to navigate through come what may.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I love that explanation. Tell us again, going back to your story before you found Carnivore, things like decisions, major decisions in your life. How were you able to manage and make good decisions about certain things when you were dealing with kind of, again, what you described as Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde? That must have been uncomfortable.
Oh my gosh, so many bad decisions. I have two failed marriages and one relationship that was 4 years that we bought a house and land, so we might as well have been married. And so basically three failed marriages and multiple firing from jobs because I just couldn't do the basics. Like I couldn't do like the paperwork. I couldn't follow the basic steps. And it, so many, honestly, to be honest with you, so many broken friendships because I just didn't know how to people. I didn't know how to, communicate in a healthy way because I was always walking around so injured. I was always walking around wanting everybody else to change for me. Like I'm offended, and so I need you to change the way you talk to me. And I realized later it wasn't them, it was me. I was the one who needed to shift my perspective and everything that I was doing.
Got it. Okay. Well, I do have good news for you. We have pharmacological solutions for brain disorders like bipolar. What was it like to go on the different medications? That must have been just amazing. The clouds lifted. Everything was sunshine and rainbows and bluebirds. What was that like?
Yeah. I did find some comfort when I first got the diagnosis. I actually ironically got the diagnosis when I was in grad school. So here I am going to get my master's in clinical counseling, and I find out I have a mental illness. But they started me on an array of medications, lithium, Prozac, just all the things, Adderall, Vyvanse, like anything you can think of. And I do want to be so grateful for these medications because they kept me from taking my own life and they kept me out of the psych ward. And so they did their job. Like they really did. They worked in that I didn't take my life and that I didn't end up back in the psych ward, but I was not functioning at all in any shape of the imagination, like No way was I functioning. And then I was having all these side effects from, the medications. And thankfully, I only was on them for about 8 years. But I shudder to think if I had been on them for longer, the damage that it could have done to my body.
Yeah. I mean, I'm just thinking like every one of those medications, like we could always learn more about them and what they do, and we don't know everything about every single one of the medications. Now, when you start to combine them into infinite, different combinations and different amounts, the interactions between all of them get infinitely more and more complicated. That would be impossible to understand. And you're right, like long-term damage, that very well could have happened to you.
Yeah, absolutely. And we don't even know. I mean, there's so many different comorbidities or things that come with studies now of multiple sclerosis. And who knows, like what that did to exacerbate my multiple sclerosis as well.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I have a client who's had MS, and similar to you, it was like using a walker, using a cane to like walk around, and same thing. Found carnivore and did it, and is off of all medications, completely reversed it. So it's cool. I've seen it in person because you never see that one going the right direction. In particular, it always goes downhill. So I have seen it work. I'm always just a little bit. I find it weird how people find the carnivore diet. Like of all things, how did you find the carnivore diet versus vegan diet or anything else that seems to be like more popular? I'm glad that more people are hearing about carnivore, but especially 5, 6 years ago, that was pretty early on. So how did you hear about it?
Yeah, my brother actually, my brother reached out and he knew that I was suffering with mental illness, and he told me about Amber O'Hearn's story. And he sent me the first chapter of her book. It's just an audio. And I literally couldn't do anything else but lay there in the bathtub and listen to it. And as I was listening, I was just like, oh, I was like, this is the thing. And then overnight, I switched to carnivore. And I even asked him, and he found out from Dr. Jordan B. Peterson. My father and me and my brother had been following every lecture that Jordan Peterson had been saying. And then he shared about Michaela's story. And I was so thankful for Michaela's story because whenever I went into the MS, I was able to really rely on her story through the autoimmune disease and know that I'm still on the right track. But yeah, that's how I found out about carnivores from my brother.
Yeah, that's amazing. I know you listed off all the foods that you kind of switched over to, steak and fatty meat and chicken with skin on it. And of course, we're both 5.5 year carnivore, so all of that food sounds very delicious. Now you had high motivations to try to heal yourself, so that may have kept you. We could say that may have kept you on track a little bit better. But just practically speaking, was it difficult for you to adapt to carnivore foods, and was it difficult for you to leave behind all the stuff that you had to leave?
Yeah, the addiction was strong, and I didn't realize how much of an addict I was until I tried to stop. Like, you always say, "Oh, I could stop." But whenever you actually do stop, the sugar, the donuts, the bread, the pasta, like when I actually stopped and it reared its ugly head, that addiction, I was like, ooh, like, whoa, what do we have here? Like I had no idea how deep I was in. And now I look back and it makes sense. Like whenever I would make cookies, I would make two batches so that I could eat the dough of one batch and then eat the cookies of the batch.
Nice.
Like that was me. And I'm from Southeast Missouri, and that's just how we eat. We eat our biscuits and gravy and our cinnamon rolls, and all the other women around me, a lot of them look like little bowling balls. Like I didn't know there was anything wrong with me, but I didn't know I wasn't big boned. I was inflamed. So for me personally, that addiction was really, really strong, and it was in my culture. Everybody
Right.
else, like it'd be like trying to stop heroin, but then you still are around a mom that has heroin, a dad that has heroin, kids that have heroin. Like it was in my community. Like heroin was everywhere, and heroin was on the billboards, and heroin is on the news feed, and it's everywhere. And then you try to stop heroin, like it's impossible. And I really attribute all of this to my bipolar disorder. That was my gift in the middle of this storm because I didn't care what anyone thought.
Yeah.
That was the beauty of my bipolar disorder, is I had this just grit to me of this rebellion and this stubbornness that I don't care what all y'all are doing. I'm going to do what I need to do.
Yeah.
And the beautiful part was about the end of the 4th week, and I experienced joy for the first time in, I can't even tell you, 30, 20 years. And it was such a foreign emotion that I was just like, what was that? And it lasted for like 10 minutes and then it went away. And I was like, that was cool. Like, that was weird. And then the next day it lasted for 15 minutes. And then the next day, 20 minutes. Like, it just progressed until it consumed my waking and my sleeping, and my everything was just joy. And then I was addicted to that. I didn't care about cake or cookies or anything. I was addicted to experiencing joy, no matter what the circumstances were. And that's how I broke my addiction to sugar, was I got hooked on joy.
That is so beautiful. Hard to keep dry eyes when you hear that story. I absolutely love that. Okay, so hindsight 2020, you had a pretty good shift, and I just want to point out you have a crazy weight loss story that we're going to park here. And I just want to point out that we're 22 minutes into this conversation, mostly about nutrition. We haven't even touched 120-pound weight loss, by the way. It's the only diet that you could say that about. Anyway, hindsight 2020, you're looking back, you made a very severe change in your diet. Going from standard American to a carnivore diet, I would say, is a pretty big step. I don't necessarily think you need to be careful, but I do think it's hard. It's going to be hard for people. And you describe yourself as being highly motivated. I think you do have to be more careful if you're going vegan to carnivore, because you might have oxalate dumps and things like that. But I also think it could be, and I don't have a specific recommendation around this. I'm just curious your thoughts. Like, when you're working with people now, do you recommend that they jump right in and just rip the band-aid off and go ahead and go carnivore? And yeah, it might be rough for a little while, but you'll get over it faster. Or do you more recommend like a more gradual kind of approach to getting into carnivore?
Yeah, it really depends on their mental stability, and on where they're at. And kind of, we have to go at the pace of their central nervous system. So if their central nervous system is going, oh my gosh, this is going to kill me, then guess what? This is going to kill them. This is going to be very difficult, because what we tell ourselves is so powerful. Our words that we say, our thoughts are so powerful. So I have to just kind of take it at their pace. If they come in and they're like balls to the wall, like, let's go, like, blah, 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 I'm like, all right, let's go. And then I'm there to kind of like guide them and navigate with them. If they get into like week 3 and they're like ready to fall on their face, I'm like, okay, 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 okay. So let's, reevaluate this. But to be totally transparent, um, I go both ways, because part of me thinks this was the only way that Emily could have done this. If I didn't get that joy, that hit of joy within 4 weeks, I really don't know if I could have lasted another 30 days. I don't know if I could have, like, we might not we have this little window. We've got to get her to joy before she's just like, screw it, I'm not going to do this. But I have talked to Sally K. Norton. I have talked to Amber O'Hearn. And I really believe that because I jumped in so quickly, what I was experiencing when the MS reared its ugly head was oxalate dumping,
Oh,
because I jumped in so hard. If I had jumped in slower, I don't think I would have been hospitalized within 3 weeks.
fascinating. Wow, that is super, super interesting. Yeah, I'll kind of explain to people like you look at a pool and there's a shallow end and there's the deep end, and it might depend on your personality. You sound like the person that would have climbed up to the 50-foot platform and just cannonballed right in, which I love. But yeah, that is a concern. Is if somebody has been eating a lot of high oxalate foods that the body's been hanging on to, that may be a reason to go a little bit more gentle. So it's fascinating to get that insight from a few very smart women. Let's just say they know a few things, the two of them.
Oh, absolutely. And Sally K. Norton, what I love about her information is that she even talks about oxalate dumping happening even into year 3, year 5, year 6. And so it's so important just to what I say is that we have to get to the place where we're at least in stability. And that usually hits about 45 days. And so even if you can get away from the Doritos and the Oreos for 45 days and just clean stuff up, then you can get to a place of a baseline. And then you can get another phase that you're going to go, okay, what am I going to do for the next 45 days? You can choose to clean it up more if you want to, but just to get yourself away from the donuts and the cake and like all the stuff and recognize that that is not the way to your health. Like that's the message that I try to get people to. And then we just kind of check in with them and see where you at on this process.
Yeah, I love that. And yeah, look, I've been able to meet both of those women, and they're so kind and wonderful. Also, they're just angels, both of them. They seriously love the two of them. I want to go to the moment that you're starting to improve. You're experiencing joy now, improving. You might be able to get off of medications. What was the deprescribing process like? It sounds like you got a bit lucky and had a doctor who was at least on board with taking you off the medications and was helping you, which obviously everybody should make sure you have a professional to help deprescribe some of these medications. But what was that process like?
Yeah, it's so interesting because I had PTSD from tapering off of medication in the past. Because whenever we would try a new med, we would have to taper off the old one. Every single time we tapered off of my meds, it rocked my boat. Like I would have like days that I'd just be like crying for no reason, or I'd be like irritable, like angry at the world, or I'd be asleep. Like I would sleep for 15 hours a day. Like I had these horrible reactions. So whenever my psychiatrist was the one in June, he was like, Emily, he's like, there's a light in your eyes. He goes, you're talking about the future and you're working full time. Like you're ready to taper off your meds. And I was like, no, like it was like my safety, like security blanket. I was like, no, 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 no. Like we just got to stability. Like why do you have to change anything? And he was just like, we'll just go just a little bit. And so we tapered off the meds and I was like holding on to the side of the boat. Like I was like ready for like stuff to rock. And I was okay. And then I went back to him the next month and I'm like, I'm fine. And he goes, okay, let's taper a little bit more down. Oh, no, no, no. And he was like, Emily, you're fine. So again, I'm like, okay, okay, taper it down. I'm okay. I'm okay. Like that was for me, it was getting over that PTSD that my experience in the past of tapering down wasn't this experience because I was nourishing my brain. I wasn't doing this on ramen noodles and Doritos. It's a completely different experience when you're tapering off of meds with fatty animal meat in your brain, because that's what your brain needs. And so I was nourishing my brain with my food and I was able to taper down on my psych meds. My psychiatrist, he was so sweet. He let me stay with him. I saw him every month to 3 months for 2 years after he prescribed my last med.
Wow.
Because and he was like, Emily, you know, like I'll stay here as long as you need to, but you're okay. And I was like, yeah, but nobody knows my crazy like you know my crazy. Like I knew that he could see my mania if it was coming in, or he could see my depression if it was coming in. He could read me like a book because he had been there for 8 years. And he was like, okay. And then finally, after 2 years, I'm like, all right, doc, like, I know your number. I'll call you if something hits the fan. And so finally we stopped our services, but I would not have done this without a psychiatrist at all.
Wow. Wow. That's amazing. So it's amazing that he was at all supportive of helping you taper off. I think that's absolutely wonderful. Did he did he care how you did it? Did he want to learn? Like, were there lots of patients like you that he was able to do that with? Was that his common practice, or were you this outlier? And if so, like, did he want to know? Was he curious? Was he on board? Did he want to try it himself or try it on other patients? Like, what was his kind of attitude?
He was definitely curious and he definitely asked a lot of questions, and I would send him my YouTube interviews and stuff. But the only way I know that he was interested is he tried keto. So he was definitely curious and he was definitely there, but he wasn't to the place that he could even admit that this is what happened. So like he was cooperative, but he would never come out and say, wow, Emily, you totally changed your mental health from eating fatty animal meat. But I did see that he did try keto for, I would say, about 3 or 4 months. And so
Not bad.
yeah.
Not bad. Especially, I believe, compared to some of your other doctors' responses. How did it go with some of the other people that were on your healthcare team?
Oh my gosh, my neurologist said that I was reckless and that I would be in a wheelchair within 10 years because I wouldn't take the injections. They wanted me to inject myself every 2 days with the MS medication. And I told him, I was just like, listen, like you're gonna monitor my MS. I'm gonna manage my MS. And then he yelled at me again and he was like, you're reckless, like you are being reckless with your health. And I'll never forget, I was up in St. Louis and I went to the parking lot to go where my car was, and I messaged Michaela Peterson in the parking lot, and I was like, told her what he said, and I said, am I being reckless? And she said, Emily, you have no symptoms of MS. And she was like, maybe when your symptoms come back, then we'll revisit this. She was like, and then she goes, and I'm not giving medical advice. I was like, I know, because she's got to cover her butt, poor thing. But that was very important to me to know, like, this is a logical choice that I have no symptoms. And so why am I going to inject my body with something that really isn't resonating with me? And so, yeah, the last time I met with the doctor, he was like, I don't want to see you for another year. And then when yeah, I was like, okay, bye. And
Yeah.
then whenever my appointment came up, I had to reschedule it because I had another appointment and I just forgot to ever reschedule it. So
Oh, darn.
I haven't seen him
Uh,
in years because
shoot.
I mean, what's the point, you know?
Sorry,
I don't
sorry.
want to.
It's such an interesting contrast hearing you, and I deliberately use the term medical team because for what you think you're building around you, you think is going to be supportive and helpful and is going to, help you get better. And that never seems to happen. It seems like you're always just managing disease and watching it get worse and worse and worse. And if you do anything that they're not aware of or don't recommend, even if it's working, it doesn't seem like many doctors care. Bless their hearts. It's frustrating. Yet you also mentioned Michaela Peterson and Sally K. Norton and Amber O'Hearn. And like these are very successful, busy authors. And Michaela's podcast is a smash success, and you were on it. And like there's this other like carnivore community that is like so willing to step in and help. Like you could just message Michaela freaking Peterson in a parking lot and she would like reach out for support. Like it's such a contrast between the two.
You know what it is that they've been through the trenches. They've been through the pain. They've been through the suffering. And I'll never forget, hearing Michaela, she was doing a live one time and she just started bawling because she was just like, I remember how it feels to have no hope and to have no answers from the doctors. And she's Caleb Peterson. She has everything at her fingertips. She has the world given to her. And they couldn't find out what was wrong with this baby girl. She was a baby when they replaced her ankle and her hip. And her daddy wanted to give her everything. And so for her, like for her and for Sally K. Norton, like they really went into the trenches of misery. And so that's why they have so much compassion, and they're such these open hearts, because they've been broken through this process and come out on the other side. And all they want to do is just give hope to people who are in misery and
Well said.
hopelessness.
Yeah, well said. I love that. Let's return to your weight loss journey. As all of these amazing things, all these amazing things are happening, you also lost quite a bit of weight. Tell us about that weight loss journey.
Yeah, that was crazy. I also remember messaging Michaela during that going, I'm losing like a pound every 2 days. And she was like, cool. But it wasn't my goal at all. Like I enjoyed my body. Like I thought I was just the most beautiful girl. And I was, the most beautiful girl. Um, it wasn't in my thought process that I was needing to lose weight. But I had no idea until I could move my body that you're supposed to be able to tie your shoes in one like bend over. I would have to do it in two, maybe sometimes three. I would hold my breath. Okay, we're going in. And then I go tie my shoe, start it. Okay, okay, okay. All right, we're going for the left one. All right, and then go in. And I had no idea until one day I was sitting there, and in one fail like swoop, I was able to tie both shoes. And I sat up and I was like, I'm not even out of breath. Like, this is so cool. And then when I started CrossFit, it was like, I can do these things. Like, this is so fun to be able to utilize your body. Cause I had just been told, I think I was 30, 36 whenever I went to the doctor, because I would be in like a staff meeting and everybody else in the room is fine. And I'm sitting here like with the fan like in my face, like I am dying of being overheated. And he was like, oh, you're just getting old. And I'm like,
Nice.
I'm 36. Like, no. So then now to have that where I can have thermoregulation, I can work out, I can go do all those things. That's my favorite part of losing weight, is being able to utilize my body. But I really don't care like what it looks like,
Yeah.
personally.
That's amazing. Well, I'm a personal trainer, so I love counting reps. So I think the first time with, doing 3 or 4 different times tying your shoes, it's just more reps. So that's pretty good. Um, and also as a personal trainer, like I'm paid to get people to move and exercise and all that stuff. Yet I don't even want them to think about moving until they sorted out the nutrition. And you did it in exactly what I would consider the right order. Start with nutrition. Let's get the brain some good energy. Let's get the body off of this inflammatory crap and feed it exactly what it needs. Let's get it into a fat burning state where, yes, like none of my personal training certifications behind me say that you can lose weight that quickly. That is impossible. 1 to 2 pounds a week is the most you could ever do. I see that all the time, that people lose weight way faster than that, doing fasting and carnivore and all kinds of stuff like that that they don't recommend. But I never recommend that people start with exercise until they have all this innate energy. Now, like try to stop you from doing these things, like try to stop you from going on a walk. You're going to love it. Like you're going to start to exercise. All those things come way more naturally, and it's a lot more joyful when that person is ready because they have so much energy.
Yeah, and I never exercised for the whole first year. Like I was, getting back to work full time. I was getting my life in order. And it just wasn't on my radar until one day I was like, I really want to move my body. And then when I started lifting weights, I was like, ooh, like I really like the way this feels in my bones to like do squats and like to lift weights. And it became a joy instead of a chore.
Yeah.
And there's a whole different experience with when your central nervous system is eager for something versus, oh my gosh, like I have to go work out. Like it's almost like you're able to have a more powerful system to be able to build muscle because everybody's on board instead of torture.
Yeah, totally. Well said. Now, are you still doing CrossFit a few days a week?
No, no, I haven't. It's a long story, but they changed gym owners, and I just
Uh,
never got back to it. But I miss it. I love it so
yeah.
much.
Individual boxes for CrossFit, if they change like ownership or management or something, they can be so vastly different. It can really change what I would consider the best part about CrossFit is the community. They do an amazing job building community, go with the same people, shared suffering, you're all accomplishing together. So I can understand that without getting into the details.
Well, my favorite thing about CrossFit is that it's almost like going into a bar where you're like, I might just have a drink. Like, I'm not going to do much. And then 3 hours later, you come out like drunk off your ass. Like, what did I just do? Like, I just danced on the table. And you go into CrossFit and you're like, I'm here, whatever. I'm going to go through the motions. And then you're like, I just did my what's that called? Best lift, your
PR, like a personal
yes,
record. Yeah.
PR, personal record. And then you're like, I just ran a mile. Like, what just happened? But the whole group, collective feel kind of like takes over. And it's my favorite thing. I need to get back to that. I really
I could
liked it.
tell you miss it. Yeah, I could tell you miss it for
I
sure.
do.
Well, I wanted to ask you about the upcoming kind of like field of metabolic psychiatry, which is really amazing that this is on the rise. We're getting studies done, new information is coming out all the time. It's fantastic. But before I ask you specifically about that, I was in a situation recently. I was talking to a client and kind of explaining what metabolic psychology was. And this, my client is like kind of on board with nutrition. And the way I was trying to describe it is like you really, I would really start with nutrition, and then the other tools that you have in your tool belt can then help a lot more when you do that. And she was more on the side of like, well, nutrition is one tool that you can use, but there's also this technique and this technique and this technique and this technique. And in her mind, it's like you try one and then maybe you try the other. And then maybe if diet comes into, your consciousness, maybe you try that. Or if the other three things fail, then we go to that. And I remember a conversation I had with Nicole Laurent about this. And it's like, if you nail the nutrition, all those other wonderful techniques, everything that you learned about in, school and training, they then work way better. It's not like they're equal and you can try one after the other. Can you tell us what your experience has been like, again, with your classic training, and then afterwards, how you've been able to change that?
Yeah, because whenever I went back to work full time, it was back into private practice. And it was very difficult for me because I felt like my hands were tied behind my back because licensing board and the insurance panels did not want me talking about food. But if I'm sitting here across from somebody with anger management, anxiety, depression, all the things, and they are elbow deep in a bag of Doritos, sipping on a big gulp, they can't hear me. They can't see me. Like it was like freaking Groundhog Day. Like I'm sitting there and I'm like, okay, well, here's this exercise, here's this modality, here's this technique that we're going to use. And I'm talking to a freaking wall. Like they're like, uh-huh, okay, yeah, okay. And so then I'm like, okay, so you understand? Okay, so we're going to come back next week and blah, blah, blah. They come back next week and they're like, now what was I supposed to do? Like, huh? Like, they're not there. And so, how ridiculous do I sound talking to this person like they're capable of understanding what I'm talking about whenever their brain is so chocked full of inflammation? So, I don't even talk to people now. Like, there's tons of other people that you can go. There's other therapists, there's other coaches. If you're not willing to remove the Doritos and the ramen noodles and the Oreos, like, I'm sorry, I can't work with you because we have to have a foundation of your brain being able to get at least to take a breath from the inflammation so that
Yeah.
then we can go into, you were raped when you were 7 and, all of this stuff. Like we can't go into all of that stuff until we stop the bleeding of having the inflammation in your brain.
Got it. So how has been the experience of your current practice of working on that? Like it might feel like you're filtering some people out, but the people that filter in are highly motivated to change their diet. What types of experiences are you noticing by coaching this way?
Yeah, I love it. I actually work with the toughest ones. If somebody's just like, oh, I just want to lose 5 pounds, I'm like, okay, go to coach so and so. I deal with the people who are just like, hey, like I committed or I attempted suicide last month and spent 5 days in the psych ward. I'm like, okay, let's go. Like those are the people that I work with, or people who are just really off the deep end, because I'm able to handle that. They're crazy. I'm able to handle their stuff because I've been there. Because I can say crazy because I was, and I still would be. Give me a bag of Doritos and I'll show you crazy. But for me personally, it has been my favorite thing because they cuss me out and they hang up on me and they get so angry. And then by like day 30, they're like, oh my gosh, I feel good. Oh my gosh, like I did this. And it's so beautiful to watch that transformation of watching them. Sometimes it gets worse before it gets better, but then still holding them and letting them know, like, it's okay, baby. Go ahead. Go ahead, cuss me out. Go ahead, do all the ugly stuff you got to do, and I'm still going to be here. I'm still going to be your friend. I'm still going to be your support team. And then when they get to that like 30, 45-day mark and their brain gets cleared and they're just like, oh my gosh, like this is why you did this. This is why you had me do this. And that it's like crack to me. Like I am so addicted to this work because it's not Groundhog Day. You actually get transformation within 45 days.
That's amazing. It's so cool. Yeah. Once you discover this kind of thing, I'm always impressed by how lit up everybody gets and how much they want to share and put that message out there, which I love. One thing I really love about your story, and I love the way you approach things, is you start with the practical and then you move to more of like the scientific or the mechanistic. It's like we can get to the science, we can get to the mechanisms, just start by eating fatty meat. Let's keep it that simple. That's what you did in your own personal story. It wasn't like you went out and had to read a bunch of books for a few years or whatever. You just like, okay, I'm going to try this because I'm desperate. And I like that you help your people that same way. That said, again, we're seeing the rise of metabolic psychology where people are writing books, they are doing studies. We have this amazing family, the Bazuki family, who started this nonprofit, the Bazuki Group. They're giving out grants and funding studies that are now being done. I just got back a month ago from the Symposium for Metabolic Health in San Diego, where there was an entire day dedicated to talks about metabolic psychiatry. And it's like one was about anorexia, one was about severe depression, one was about bipolar. The topics are so wide. How do you feel knowing that, like, finally we're getting some attention on this, and they're like scientists are figuring it out and they're explaining it mechanistically. It's not just case studies. What do you think of that?
Did you see Dr. Chris Palmer talk at the Senate?
Yes, yes,
Like
I know.
that like made my whole week. Like I was screenshotting that picture of Chris Palmer and Michaela Peterson and Jordan Peterson and Casey and Callie Means. Like that picture was like a carnivore's just dream, especially to have been going through this for 5 years with everybody telling me I'm going to die of heart disease and that I just need to take my medicine and that I'm crazy for, doing this. I'm so extreme. Like seeing people bring the science that I could never bring, like Dr. Chris Palmer with anybody who hasn't listened to it or read it, Brain Energy. So all you need is
Listen
that
to it.
book.
It's amazing. Yeah.
I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful because they go into the areas that I could never go into, just because my brain isn't wired that way to go into the science, but it answers all of those hecklers, all
Mm.
of those people. All I have to do is just go, have you read Brain Energy? Go ahead, here you go. Have you talked to, Michaela Peterson? Have you listened to her podcast? Or like the symposium that you just went to? That's amazing. Or they're having what is it called? The Metabolic Revolution or
Yeah.
something like
Yep.
that
Yep. I
in
just hosted a guy named Steve. Yeah. Yeah. We talked about that. Yeah.
in DC.
Yep.
Like this stuff is happening. Like I'm so excited.
I
So
know.
excited.
It's so exciting. Yeah, for such a grassroots movement. It just takes so much patience to see it grow, but it does kind of feel like there's a little bit of a swell. I think there's enough people that are really sick of being sick and want different information and are starting to sniff out that there might be a rat, and we may have been told the wrong information for so long. And I just think your story is so inspiring. What are you looking forward to for the future? Is there anything that you're specifically planning on in the future? Any way you're trying to expand or just continue going day by day and trying to help your people?
Yeah, just helping my people. I know this sounds really weird. I worked with a marketing person, they're like, what's your ideal client? And I'm like, the most miserable people in the world.
Mm.
Like the people that they're like, nobody in my family understands me, nobody listens to me, my doctors don't know what to do with me. Like those are the people that I can't wait whenever they get on my Zoom screen and I get to tell them, you're not broken, you're brilliant. Like, oh my gosh, like I just absolutely love watching people really realize that it's not their fault that they've been served up a pile of lies and that they get to be in control of their own health. Nobody controls what you put in your mouth. No one. They can control your body, they can handcuff you, they can rape you, they can do. Nobody forces you to eat cake. Nobody forces you to eat donuts. You get to choose. Wherever you're at, most people, wherever you're at in America, you get to choose the food that you put in your mouth. And so therefore you get to choose your destiny and your health. And it's my favorite thing in the whole world. I love my job.
Well, I'm certainly not going to say anything after that wonderful statement. This has been an amazing conversation, Emily. I really appreciate your story and your just, again, just such an inspiration, and to be able to turn around and continue to work with people and help people out there who really feel lost. Emily Penton, where would you like people to go to find you and connect with you and your work?
EmilyPenton.com. And that has all my ways to connect. So EmilyPenton.com.
That is very, very, very simple. Did I get the website incorrect in the introduction? Is that an older website?
Yeah, it's EmilyPenton.com now.
Okay, gotcha. I will make sure that I correct that and everything. But again, Emily, thank you so very much for coming on the show today. Thank you for taking that journey, being willing to try something a little bit different and extreme, but then to find all that healing and share it with everybody else is very, very inspiring. So very, very grateful for you. Thank you so much for coming on our show today. We really appreciate you.
No problem. Thanks for all that you're doing, Casey. I cannot thank you enough because we need all hands on deck.
Yeah, I
Like
agree.
we got to go help the people. So I'm glad you're doing what you're doing.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you so much for the kind words. And this has been another episode of Boundless Body Radio.